welcome to the NBA Daily, where we are doing NBA season previews. And today we're talking Dallas, baby. And I got Christian Clark, who covers them for The Athletic, in to talk to me about what's going on with the Mavericks and prepare us for this very interesting season. Lots of excitement, Christian, lots of uncertainties around this team about what they're going to look like this year. Talk to me a little bit about the offseason. We know everything was around this monumental trade last year. Luka Doncic leaves Dallas, goes to LA. Feels like we've had a little bit of time to get used to that, obviously. Second half of the season comes about. We get through draft. Cooper Flagg goes exactly where we thought he was going to go and performs really well in Summer League. But there's been a lot more that's going on around the Dallas Mavericks. So what happened this offseason? Summarize it for us.
Yeah, I mean, as everybody knows, February through April could not have been worse for the Dallas Mavericks. They make this crazy trade. Kyrie Irving, blows out his knee. They kind of limp into the play-in tournament, are eliminated. And then, really since then, things have been pretty good for them. 1.8% chance of getting the number one pick, which they used to select Cooper Flagg. Kyrie Irving, takes a little bit less money. That allows them to get D'Angelo Russell on mid-level exception there. They've signed Daniel Gafford and PJ Washington to extensions. I think they're talented. They're deep. I don't know how well all the pieces fit together, but they're certainly an interesting team.
Right. I think this is why everyone's like, the Mavs might be sneaky good this year. I think there's still a little bit of question around what does their ball handling look like? What does their perimeter defense look like? But of course, PJ Washington is one of the big names when it comes to that defensive identity, as someone that could be a very big factor for them. But my question when I think about PJ Washington is, does he still start when you consider some of the pieces that are available? And it leads to the question of which player is going to be the most impactful this season for the Mavs. And of course, we think about Cooper Flagg. We think about potentially PJ Washington coming off the bench. I want to go ahead and start with that question of the starters first, and then we could talk about who's going to be impactful. Who do you think is going to be starting for this team, Christian?
I'm looking at it like there are four locks. I think D'Angelo Russell, just that stopgap at point guard until Kyrie is back.
Right.
I think Cooper Flagg, the number one pick, he's got to start. I mean, you don't take Cooper Flagg and put him on the bench.
Right.
Anthony Davis is going to start at power forward, and then it's going to be one of Lively or Gafford. I would say Lively, but it really could be either one. Both started when either were healthy, and that kind of leaves one spot for PJ Washington or Klay Thompson. If it was up to me, I'm looking at it, I'm like, I just don't think there's enough shooting here. Like, I'd feel like I need Klay Thompson in there.
Right.
But I do think there's a world where it's possible they start PJ Washington and just go with this huge lineup where it's, effectively Cooper Flagg at like the two. And it's D'Lo, Flagg, PJ, AD, and Lively. I mean, that's like a monster size lineup. So I think that's within the realm of possibility. But if it's up to me, I'm just like, there's just not enough shooting. We got to go with Klay.
And I'm thinking about Klay Thompson. Max Christie came over as well in that trade from the Lakers and had a pretty good end of the season for himself, was being able to find some repetition within his game. When you're thinking about the players that are coming in to this season, a little bit on the younger side, of course, Cooper Flagg, Max Christie, Dante Exum's going to come back into the mix. He's on the older side, but still someone that's coming back into the mix. Who's going to make a big step forward? Who's going to be super impactful if they elevate their game?
Man, yeah, Max Christie, he got off to a great start with the Mavs, and then he really petered out. A lot of that, he just didn't have people setting him up, and we needed to be more creator. It didn't look great. I think D'Angelo Russell is going to have a better year than he did last year. I mean, I think he's going to be motivated. I mean, last year was horrible for him. He gets benched early in the year. He kind of gets, sent to Brooklyn, and then people forget about him. I mean, it was an awful year for D'Lo, and this is a kind of a prove it contract. And if this year goes well, like, I think that can matter a lot for the next 5 years of D'Angelo Russell's career. So he's a guy where it's like, I think he's going to be better than he was last season. Look a little bit more like the guy he was 2 years ago with the Lakers when, he made a ton of threes. Like, the Mavs are going to need him to be that guy who's making around 200 threes.
It's interesting that you went with D'Angelo Russell. I was not expecting that as a player that could make a bigger step forward, especially with someone that is a little bit older in age, that has had experience around the league, may not feel as if they have as much to prove in comparison to some of the younger players. But you're right in terms of the motivation. That immediately makes me think of someone else that's on this team in a very similar situation in terms of wanting to prove something, Anthony Davis. What's the expectation for him, especially alongside the stars that they got in a Cooper Flagg coming in from the draft?
Yeah, I mean, Anthony Davis played 9 games as a Dallas Maverick last year. I think that was hugely disappointing to everyone involved, and especially Anthony Davis. I mean, he probably shouldn't have tried to come back at the end of the year. I mean, just watching him that play-in tournament game in Memphis, it's like you're not close to 100%. You're barely getting up and down the court. I think a lot of that was pride. I think Nico stuck his neck out there for him. He wanted to try to help Nico. And I think he was getting like kind of dogged a little bit too. So he's like, look, I'm going to go out there and try.
Yeah.
We got to see, on media day, what is the state of his eye? He had surgery for a detached retina. Obviously missed a lot of time with a strained adductor last year. So one, is he going into the year healthy? And then I think the big question with AD is, the Mavericks made this trade with the idea of playing him at power forward more so than center. And that's been a big story throughout his career. The Pelicans always wanted him to play the 5. He says, no, I'm more comfortable power forward. The Lakers, they won the championship in 2020 with him primarily playing power forward next to JaVale McGee and Dwight Howard. And then it's more 5 after that. If you remember, even Jeannie Buss right before the trade kind of dinged him. Like, she was not happy that AD went to ESPN and complained about like, oh, we need to go and get a center. I mean, Jeannie Buss hated that, So it's been a huge story throughout his career. He's getting what he wants in Dallas. I mean, the Mavericks have 2 true centers. So how is that going to look, offensively, defensively? I think it's going to be awesome. The Mavs are going to have a ton of shot blocking, interior protection. But how is that going to look offensively with AD playing the majority of his minutes at the 4?
Well, what's interesting about that is that AD does like to take the ball off the rim and go. He likes to play that power forward, point forward positioning. And I think that that's going to be really important for Dallas. I'm thinking also about the fact that they're going to need ball handling. Of course, D'Angelo Russell, as you mentioned, a stopgap until Kyrie Irving returns. Dante Exum definitely can help with that perspective as well. But what are your thoughts around, a PJ Washington, a Najee Marshall being able to have the ball in their hands a little bit more to set the floor for Dallas?
They're going to have to get creative. I mean, the guy who effectively started at point guard for them last year in the play-in tournament was Najee Marshall. Not exactly ideal. I guess one thing I'll say here is the Mavericks have, and Jason Kidd specifically has talked about, we want to put the ball in Cooper Flagg's hands. He's really brought up this idea of, point Cooper Flagg. And when he said it at Cooper Flagg's introductory press conference, I was like, I don't know, maybe they're making too much of this. And then at Summer League, they actually did it. Like, Cooper Flagg was bringing the ball up a ton, against pressure in the 2 game he played. So I think that could be real. Jason Kidd has kind of talked about, hey, that was what I did with Giannis early in his career, and that helped him grow as a player. So I think there's a chance that's pretty real. And we see Cooper Flagg handling the ball a lot, even though he's 6'8", 6'9", big dude.
But from what you saw at Summer League, and I would agree with you, I think Cooper Flagg feels very comfortable in this. This is what we saw at Duke. He is a playmaker. He is a distributor. He has great floor vision in general. But what would you think that you prefer when you're thinking about the availability of shooting? And, Cooper Flagg can shoot. It's not necessarily the number one thing that he can do, but would you prefer him going off the ball, flattening out while, you have a D'Angelo Russell at the top trying to figure things out and setting the floor? Would you prefer him with the ball in his hands?
I mean, if the goal is to win right now, I think Cooper Flagg is best, sometimes handling the ball, but really being a guy who sets screens, who cuts, who gets a lot of his points, that way. I mean, if I'm like, can get one type of player next to Cooper Flagg, if I'm just drafting one player that I think is going to complement him the best, it's like a stud, ball, like lead ball handling guard, like Kyrie Irving. Kyrie Irving would be awesome.
Right.
He would definitely help his game, and they've got the guy. He just probably won't be on the court until 2026. I think Cooper Flagg can do it. I guess my concern with this team is the offense going to look sludgy? In those 9 games AD played in last year, they're last in 3-point makes, last in 3-point attempts. I think they're just going to have to grind out a lot of wins. I don't think there's going to be a lot of easy wins for the Dallas Mavericks, even though they are super talented. I just don't think it's going to be easy for them to score on a lot of nights.
Yeah. And, thinking about their defense, I think bottom third of the league last year. I think that's a magic factor for them. The fact that you're in the Western Conference and you can't stop anyone, like that's going to be a big problem. When you think about the fact that you want a point guard, someone that can handle the ball a little bit better, of course, D'Angelo's here, but is there a possibility for trades this season to try and get that ball handling guard into the mix?
Yeah, I mean, I think they would say, oh, Kyrie Irving's he's our trade acquisition. He's going to be our mid-season acquisition. But yes, the real answer is yes. You look at the two guys they traded for ahead of the 2024 deadline that helped them get to the finals, Daniel Gafford and PJ Washington. Both those guys signed extensions this year. I'm just looking at the Mavericks roster as a whole after the Flagg miracle. It's a very crowded front court. I think some people are kind of looking at it like, okay, could they make a consolidation move just because they have so much front court talent and not a ton of ball handling and outside shooting? Is there a move to be made? They didn't. But I still think it's possible one happens midseason. I'm leaving the door open. I don't think they're looking to make any trades right now, but I think you have to leave the possibility open. And when you look at the extensions from those two guys who they got in 2024, Gafford is trade eligible this season. So Gafford's on a nice contract. He's a guy good enough to be a starting center. PJ Washington is not trade eligible, but when I'm just looking at the cap sheet, when I'm just looking at this roster, that's one guy I kind of look at if things don't go well and they feel like we have to do something to address the guard spot. That's one area I'm looking at.
And capable centers are hard to come by in this league. Daniel Gafford, I think would have a really good market for him. When you think about the Dallas Mavericks and you're evaluating what could this season be, you talked about the sludge factor, you talked about the offensive capability. There's different things that you could look at in terms of what could be the biggest swing factor, what could change the trajectory of the Dallas Mavericks. It could be Anthony Davis being in prime Anthony Davis form. It could be Cooper Flagg having the rookie season that we're all anticipating him to have. It could be Klay Thompson returning to Splash Brother, feelings of shooting outside. Like, what do you think would be the biggest factor for this team that could completely swing them in the right direction?
Yeah, I think the Mavs, even if Kyrie only plays 20 games or whatever, we just don't know. They're talented enough to be a top 6 team. I think most people see them in the play-in, and if things don't go well, they could be below that. But the thing that, it hinges on to me is how many games is Anthony Davis going to play in this year? Because 9 games last year, obviously with the adducter, actually had a good run of health for him in the season and a half before that with the Lakers, was very available. Then, dealt with a lot of injury issues before that. I mean, that's the number one thing that, if you're telling me how the season goes for Dallas, how many games is AD going to play in? Are we getting 65 plus 70 games from him, or is this going to be, 50 or something like that? I think that's kind of what it hinges on for me.
The greatest ability is availability. That's very real, Christian. Okay, so you kind of hinted this a little bit. Last year, ending up 10th in the Western Conference, in the play-in position, of course. Looking at this season, what is the most realistic outcome for the Dallas Mavericks, in your opinion?
When you saw all the over-unders come out, I think some people were like, whoa, Dallas is kind of low just for all the names and the talent that they have. Those kind of stuff are slotting them in at the play-in, and I think that's probably where I see them too. I think they're one of those play-in tournament teams. They could be going into that, and Kyrie looks awesome, and it's nobody wants to see them, and they are a team capable of going deep in the playoffs. Or it could be like last year, where it's they just kind of limped in and then they peter out. But I see them in the play-in tournament range. I think it's possible they could get into the top 6, but it's just a weird basketball fit to me. Even though I love a lot of players on this team, it's just they're playing a little bit different than anybody else.
I really think that their defensive capability, just from being massive, could actually be a super huge factor in being able to get them a few more wins. Maybe I'm biased right now. At the time we're recording this, I'm sitting in the Bay. I'm looking at the WNBA. I'm looking at the Golden State Valkyries just beating New York Liberty, one of the biggest teams in the W. just off of playing hard and playing gritty. And I don't know if that's going to necessarily be their identity in Dallas, but I definitely think there's something about size and making it difficult to get past them. Cause that's what I saw with the Mavericks in Summer League, particularly with Cooper Flagg playing almost like a man zone just because he's so huge, out on the perimeter. So I'm putting some hope into the Mavericks, whether they figure out their offense or not, we'll see. But I do think there's something about you can't teach size. So that's all. Anything else on the cutting room floor before this season gets going for Dallas Mavericks from you?
No, I think besides just like, how does it look offensively? Who's going to get those kind of like, what do they do when D'Lo goes to the bench? Is it Cooper Flagg? Is it Exum? Is it Brandon Williams? Maybe is it you're going deep into the bench and Ryan Nembhard, who they got on a 2-way. I'm just curious to see what they do in kind of those non-D'Lo minutes, and if they really do just like smash the Cooper Flagg at point guard button.
Yeah, it's going to be an interesting offense. It's going to be interesting how teams just blow that up as well, because we know that, D'Lo can find himself into foul trouble if he doesn't really want to play defense. So we'll see what happens there. But I appreciate you, Christian, giving us all of the insight for this team going into this season. I think that there's a few teams around the association that could have super high ceilings and then also very low floors. And I feel like Dallas definitely is one of those teams. So thanks, Christian, for joining us. And guys, continue to stay locked in on the NBA Daily as we continue all of our season previews. Have a good one.